Hello, and welcome to EVKA's Talk at 5 o'clock. And I'm happy to be here with my guest, Abby. She shared with me her enormous and fascinating story, how it's almost like from the book, literally. But I'm not going to don't take my word for it. Let Abby to dive into her story and journey from unknown to unforgettable. So, Abby, how are you doing today?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so much looking forward to this conversation.
I look forward to have this conversation with you. And I did send Abby, like I usually do, a very challenging questions. And hopefully she gave it some deep thoughts and help her to shape her story from where it all started. So Abby, tell us a little bit about your early ages and, how did you start? Where did you grow up and how your upbringing was like?
Yeah. At a very early age, I grew up in a rural area. So life was different than it is in New York City now. So let me fast forward to where I am now, because I think that will help shape some context of where I've come from. So I'm Abby Hamilton, as you know. I'm based in New York City. I live in Jersey City with my wonderful husband, my two kids, my two senior dogs, and I'm a chief people officer at a tech company. And thinking back to the early version of me, this scenario that I just laid out in front of you isn't something that I thought was possible or even an option for someone like me, just because I didn't have exposure to that. Like, again, I grew up in a very rural area. I grew up with a family that worked hard and put forth great values for me, but we didn't have a lot, right? And I think I didn't know that at the time, and I had to be willing to figure out how to put myself out there and to move forward. I put myself through college. I did that by getting as many student loans as I possibly can, getting financial aid, and working full time. So I worked full time retail, went to school full time. I was an officer in my sorority. I was a member of an honors fraternity and an officer there. Looking back and thinking about that makes me tired, but there's so much that goes into that. And when I think about my career from that date forward, there are really special people too that helped me get to this place. Nobody does anything alone. And there are people that make a profound impact on your journey. And you've got to decide if you're going to lean into those moments with those individuals or not. And there wouldn't be this career journey for me in the recruiting and people space if it weren't for that very special first person that gave me my shot. Her name is Debbie Bruno. She is the president of Direct Sales Recruiting. And let me set that scene for you. I just packed up the back seat of my trusty red Chevy Cavalier and I moved to New Jersey after I graduated. I had never actually visited New Jersey before that day. Bold move, right? So totally dating myself here, but I applied to a job ad she had posted in the Sunday paper. I mean, if that doesn't paint a picture of how long ago this was, I don't know what will. But anyway, I sent in my resume, and wouldn't you know it, Debbie actually called me. We talked for a little bit, and she hit me up with, have you thought about being a recruiter? And here's the kicker. I replied with something truly embarrassing. Like, I think I've talked to a few recruiters, but I'm not sure what you do. True story. I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. So Debbie doesn't hang up on me, but instead she says, how about we meet tomorrow? Let's have coffee at Panera Bread. And I show up and I meet her after my final interview at Enterprise Rent-A-Car, feeling very professional. I had in my all black suit, my white button up from Express, of course, complete with my heels from Payless. I thought I was killing it with my look. We chatted way longer than we planned. And by the end of it all, Debbie asked if I want to come in the next day and shadow at her office. And she very kindly told me I didn't have to be as dressed up. So I guess that whole power suit vibe was a little bit much for Panera. But the next day I showed up. I was more casual. and I was ready to see what this recruiting thing was all about. So I shadowed for a few hours, and by the end of it, I had an offer on the table. Now, I was deciding between that opportunity and this completely different path, but I thought, well, recruiting seems like I'm just talking on the phone all day, and if I work hard, I'll make money. Okay, but I was in for a big surprise because as it turns out, it was so much more than that. And Debbie took a chance on me when I didn't even fully understand what I was stepping into. She saw something in me that I definitely didn't see in myself at the time. And that decision launched an incredible career for me. And if it weren't for her giving me that opportunity, I don't know where I'd be today. So how have I used that to continue to shape me and pay that forward throughout the days? Well, I try to continue to be somebody that recognizes potential in others and put things out there that I want to come back to me, even when others may not see that themselves the same way that others have done for me. And I think about Debbie and the other real key people in my life and in my career that helped open those doors for me. And I try and do the same things for others because you never know where someone's journey might lead. And sometimes all it takes is that one person who sees something in you before you see it in yourself. Because if you look at me on paper, I should not be sitting here in front of you today.
Amazing. Were you the first person in your family that actually got higher education?
Yeah, 4-year college degree. So neither my parents have a 4-year college degree, nor my grandparents. And so I knew from an early age it was something I wanted to do. I'm not sure why, except for the fact I thought there was something else out there. And I wanted to really go for it. And I wanted to try something different. And I was determined to go to college, no matter what it took, right? And I think it would have been really easy to say, there's a lot of debt in front of you. There's a lot of uphill battle. How can you possibly afford this? Because I couldn't. But instead, I found a way to do that by getting the loans, by putting myself through school, by working hard and finishing up with a degree that I hoped would take me somewhere. I got a degree in business administration. And I said I picked that because I knew I wanted to be a manager one day. No idea what that means, right? But at that time, I knew I wanted to be a boss.
That's a good inspiration. Were your family, they were supported, excited, concerned, worried? How did they feel about you going to college and then moving to another state completely by yourself? What they were telling you?
Yeah. If I think back to that time, I would say my mother at the time gave me the best piece of advice I could have ever been given. And she said, you can always come home. Right. And I think that is a huge thing in that you can take that risk. You can take that chance because I knew at the end of the day, I could always go home if I needed to. But now fast forward, it's been 20 plus years and New York and New Jersey is my home now. And that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have just packed up the back of the car that day and took a chance to go somewhere that I'd never been before.
And it's amazing how one person can completely transform the trajectory of your whole entire life. That one, I think this was one of those defining moments that really kind of completely swayed you in a completely different area, completely different lifestyle that you couldn't even imagine. Because I remember we met the first time and I see this like very polished, beautiful, gorgeous lady sitting with amazing skyscrapers on the back. I was like, wow. And when you told me your story in the first place, it blew my mind because again, it's very much possible. And people would say that sometimes like, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But sometimes you really need to put a faith in yourself and open yourself for possibilities that you cannot even imagine and allow people see things in you. I think we also, you also have this power to really allowing another person to see something in yourself. I've seen a lot of situations, you've probably seen those too, when people would tell you like, you have so much potential. You're like, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. And you sell yourself short, which really limits your ability to really exponentially grow to an imaginable height. So tell us a little more after you kind of took this first job. how did your career start changing? How did your life start changing?
Yeah. It's been a series of steps, right? Nothing happens quickly, and there's setbacks along the way. And so it's how in those moments you define yourself and what you keep doing. Because honestly, I feel like giving up all the time, right? And I think there's this idea that once you reach a certain point in your career or in your life, you suddenly have it all together. And that's so far from my truth. There have been so many moments when things didn't go my way at work, at home, or in my personal life. I also have been passed up for opportunities I thought I deserved. I, as a woman, I've watched the scale climb higher and higher. Even if I was working out, I was eating well, I didn't know what to do or how to stop that. I've had personal relationships fall apart. And let's be real, I've had plenty of days where just getting out of bed, let alone thinking about exercising or all those things in front of me, felt just really hard. I mean, there have been days where I've looked around my house at the mess, the chaos, and I thought, I just can't do this today. And in those moments, it's not some grand motivational speech that keeps me going. It's how I choose to talk to myself in those smallest, quietest moments. And I'll admit it, I can be really harsh. My inner voice is often critical. It's telling me I'm not doing enough. I should be further ahead. I should be more on top of things. I should be better. But what I've learned is these micro moments by myself, that's when I get to decide if I'm going to keep going. And what's kept me going is this really stubborn part of me that refuses to let my own self-doubt win. And I try to remember that these moments when I feel really overwhelmed or I feel like giving up, those are temporary. And how I respond to them will shape everything that comes after. I remember there are so many people out there that would trade places with me in a heartbeat. I'm incredibly blessed. And sometimes just showing up for yourself in those tough moments is the win. So maybe I don't clean my whole house, but I'll pick up one thing. Maybe I don't go out and run a marathon, but I'll do a 10-minute Peloton class. It's about small steps when everything else feels like too much. And it's all of those moments throughout my career, my life, where I chose not to give up that have shaped me more than anything else. I'm still learning to speak more kindly to myself and recognize I'm doing the best I can. Because at the end of the day, it's not about perfection. Sometimes it's as simple as showing up. And I think that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Just keep showing up and putting one foot in front of another.
And I love the fact that you brought it up, that you're still learning to talk gently to yourself. And this is a lot of us really struggling with for a long time. The self-criticism is a very powerful tool, but it doesn't necessarily give us take us to the result that we desire. Sometimes just giving yourself like a little pat and a hug and feel love for yourself really brings the best to you, recharges you, gives you opportunity to really take a break and appreciate the moments that you've gone so far and you've conquered this, you've done this. So learning to love yourself and be empathetic to your own struggles, actually, this is going to take you so much further than just a little whip and, self kind of disciplining voice inside of it. I always say that there's two sides and we need them both and they complement each other. One that actually like pushes us, like, you can do it. You have to do it. You have to like stop whining, like just get it done. And another thing, like, I admire you. You've done so far. You've done so well. You're so wonderful. You're amazing. You're incredible. You're one of a kind. And you can conquer this because I believe in you. And all of those voices need to complement each other. And I think that's what really helps us to conquer anything that comes, on our way.
100%.
So after you've kind of learned your way through the recruitment piece, what was the next steps and what kind of obstacles did you ever doubt yourself? Like, did I choose the right path? Am I on the right trajectory? Do I need to go back home? Or, what am I doing? Like, where I'm going from there?
All the time. And it's about taking your setbacks and those unexpected moments and how do you lean into those to change your own perspective. And when you're saying that, immediately this memory popped in my mind. And there was one experience that helped shape my perspective on setbacks. And it happened relatively early in my tenure at a new position. You come into a new role, I was eager to prove myself. I was working hard to set up the processes, the structure, everything that I believed would lead to long-term success for the company. And I proposed implementing a new tool. It wasn't something expensive or flashy, but I knew it would help us and would be needed, especially if we ever decided to go public in the future. And I thought I had a solid case. But to put everything in place, I needed to navigate a series of approvals from other leaders. So when I submitted for approval, one of those leaders called me to discuss the proposal. I, of course, went through my list of benefits, why I thought it would support the business, how it was going to set us up for the future. I felt really good about it. And then he said something to me I wasn't prepared for. He told me, I've been a part of this team for a long time. You should stop trying to change these leaders because you're never going to be able to do it here. And in that moment, it felt like such a punch to the gut. But instead of letting it knock me down, well, it knocked me down for a few moments, but letting me knock me down indefinitely, I decided to let that fuel me. I didn't listen to the advice to stop trying. Instead, I used it as a sign I should double down on my commitment. I could do this. I knew I could help. I knew I could make progress in that company, and I did just that. And looking back, I already believed at that moment that obstacles are less about the roadblock itself or what was happening, and it was more about how I was choosing to face that moment when somebody told me I couldn't. And while I didn't implement that tool immediately, that persistence creates a ripple effect. And it opens doors for other changes I wanted to make. And over time, I was able to gain the trust and influence I needed to drive even bigger initiatives forward. And that lesson for me was that resistance is sometimes a sign you're on the right path. Even though it feels counterintuitive, the obstacles aren't meant to stop you. They're meant to push you to innovate, to think differently, and to be stronger. And if you face that wall, don't walk away from it. Take a breath, re-find your footing, keep going, because what feels like a setback in that moment can be a very, very much the breakthrough that changes everything.
That's a very good point, because so many people get stuck or get discouraged at the slightest sign of resistance and start doubting yourself. Am I on the right track? Am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right directions? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't. And that's the whole thing. Like, my family once told me that the greatest accomplishments in life lie on the other side of our fears. So, and that's the same applies to resistance. If you keep on just pushing it, or don't get discouraged by the slightest sign of resistance, you are greater and better achievements just around the corner. So keep persisting with that. It's very powerful tool. Have you ever had a moment where you were thinking to completely change the directory and change the career path altogether, or you always felt like you are right where you should be going?
Yeah, I think as I progressed, I am very lucky in feeling that I was going in the direction I was meant to go and that I needed to be in, which doesn't mean that I didn't question myself or know what I was doing, right? When I think back to those times, I'm very lucky to have been able to progress this way. And I think about early in my career, thinking about people and the role I took in, whether it was recruiting, HR, people initiatives in general. I held this belief that in my job, I could change people, whether it was through guidance, through mentoring, or just through sheer force of will, because that was my job. I thought if I worked just hard enough, if I cared enough, or if I pushed them hard enough, I could transform someone into who I believed they had the potential to be. But over time and through many hard lessons, I've learned there's this quote from Maya Angelou that comes to mind, and it's 100% true. And she said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I used to expect more from people than they were capable of giving, or more than they were willing to give. And that wasn't fair to them or to me. And I think that did make me question the job I was in at times. And it's taking a step back to realize people reveal themselves through their actions, not through their words. And we've got to stop expecting different things from people when they've already shown us what to expect. And that shift in perspective was huge for me, not just in leadership, but in life. And I think did help me realize that I could be successful in this role. And there's also a personal lesson here when I think about it, is when I react emotionally to something, when I lose my temper or I'm getting frustrated, I've learned it's often me trying to tell myself something more than it is about the other person. So maybe I've been holding on to unrealistic expectations, or I'm ignoring something that's right in front of me. And it's not about labeling somebody as a bad person. That's not at all what it's about. The truth is, people don't change because we want them to. They change when they're ready to. And it's not our job, and it wasn't my job to force that change, but to accept what it is and move forward. And that shift in perspective has been freeing. And I think it's allowed me to lean into my role even more. And so while I'm far from perfect at all of this, instead of putting pressure on myself to fix people or situations, I focus on what I can control, which are my actions, my reactions, and my boundaries. And it's not about giving up hope in people, but respecting where they are in their journey, knowing when to step back and support them instead. And I still want to see the best in people. And I think that is a big core of what I do and what makes me good at my job. But I now know that it doesn't mean I have to carry the weight of changing them. That is not my job. And that is what made me feel like maybe I couldn't do it. And the most empowering thing we can do is focus on our own growth and accept that everyone else is responsible for theirs. And I can just give them the tools to help them do that. So we move forward by letting go of what we can't control and trusting that we'll attract the right people and the right opportunities along the way.
And that's true. You only can lead the horse to the water. You can't make them drink. And sometimes people are in a different stages in life. And in the psychology, if like I've been passionate about psychology, they always teach you, don't try to force the efforts on the people. Everybody's following their own journey. And it may not be the right time for them yet. But the best thing we can do for people is to focus on our own transformation, our own personal inner journey. So they will be a reflection of us. And they will lift them up by lifting ourselves first. Same applies to the children. Same applies to partners. I've seen so many people go to like family counseling and say like, you need to change this guy, or go into conference meetings with the conflict resolution, but it's not my fault, but they're not doing the work. In reality, the only thing that we can really control is ourselves. And if we lift ourselves up and start growing personally, professionally, mentally, we lift our surroundings as well. And I think this is the very precious thing to preserve in human capital, human management, to really teach not only yourself, but others to lift each other up by focusing on themselves first. This is great. So tell me a little bit, what is the hardest questions or hardest challenges you faced throughout your career that were almost kind of putting you to the edge and giving you some hard times?
Yeah, I think we all have those situations where things don't go your way. You get passed over for the promotion. You get passed over for the job you want. You get passed for a compensation increase. And thinking about these times for myself, it's also reminding myself, that version of me in that moment, or even now, that accepting a situation doesn't mean I have to like it, but it is a necessary step for progress, right? And so many things in business aren't our decisions to make. And accepting that doesn't mean defeat. It means acknowledging the pieces we've been given and choosing to take that next step. And when that time comes, moving forward with clarity and purpose, and picking myself back up from whatever that setback is. And then when it's time to move forward, I often need to remind myself that my life is about more than just checking things off a to-do list. I am very, very, very task-oriented. I'm very action-oriented. And it's easy to get caught up in tasks and deadlines, but real growth comes when you focus on what truly matters. Building relationships, learning from the times that you do stumble, and creating meaningful impact. So in those moments where things aren't going my way, take it slow, step back, focus on the big picture, and don't lose sight of the connections and moments that make your career more than just a series of tasks, because it's not been easy.
Is there a person that you usually turn into for an advice, counseling, mentorship when the tough time gets rough?
Always, I think you need those people in your life. So there are two very special people that I'll turn to. Of course, I bring my husband into those conversations, although I don't always want his advice. I just want him to listen. And then, of course, my best friend. She has just been a key person in my life and has helped me during some really tough times. And there was one time where I was going through something that was pretty difficult personally. And I was at this crossroads where I really needed to make a decision on what was going to be next for me. And I was scared, right? Because I have a network of friends here in New Jersey and New York that have become my family, but I didn't have my family here. And they weren't really in a position they could help me if things went wrong. And so I was scared about what would happen if I did this and I lost my job. I was scared about what would happen if no one were to ever want to be with me, right? All these things play in your mind about what happens when I'm alone. And then there was a day that changed it all for me. I was driving the car with her and I told her something that happened the day before. And she literally told me to pull over the car and asked me why I was doing this. And admitted how scared I was. And I listed my fears. And she told me I was right. She said she would absolutely stand beside and watch me fail. She'd watch me be homeless. And the people that cared about me would step aside and just watch me completely fail. And I needed to start fresh. And I needed to take a really scary risk on the other side. Even if it meant taking that risk meant more things could potentially go wrong than might go right. I tend to be very independent, very self-sufficient, and I work hard to avoid depending on other people. And my efforts to do well and appear in control are focused on gaining that security I need, even when I don't feel it at all. And so I compete against myself more than other people. And she gave me the courage that day to say I needed help. And she promised me that I would look back in 12 months and be very surprised at how far I'd come. And she was right. I took a next step before I could let fear change my mind. And the people that cared about me rallied to support me. My boss helped me in ways I didn't expect at that time. My friend of a friend came out of the woodwork to help. And people just rallied around me when I said I was scared and I was in a vulnerable position. And there are different types of people, for good or for bad. As I said, I'm very action-oriented, which can drive people crazy. But when times are tough, I'm likely to respond by working and trying even harder than before. And it helped me overcome obstacles like that one and work around blockages. And I try to prove that I'm worthy and I'm enough and remind myself of that and use the pressure and challenges as opportunities to prove my ability and what I can do when times are hard.
It's amazing. And the key, I think, to remember here that, quite honestly, we don't really have anything, or we don't have much of control of anything that surrounds us. We can't control our jobs. We cannot control our parents or partners or kids, friends. And at any given time, pretty much everything that we have built for years can be taken away from us, except one thing, which is ourselves. No one can take you away from you. You always be there, the type of person who you are. And if one day you wake up, you have absolutely nothing and you completely, basically homeless and unemployed, all alone, you're still not going to be alone. You have you and the same person that built an unimaginable career growth came from humble upbringing to a very successful career. And if you've done it once, you can do it twice, you can do it 3 times, you can do it infinity many times, because the powers that are, got you there, they're within you, and they're not external factors that drive your success. This is who you are, your personality, your charisma, your character. that your upbringing from the family, the values that shaped you in the personality that really shines. And no matter which situation you end up, no matter where in the country, in the world you end up, you'll still be with yourself. And so again, be gentle and be nice to yourself and praise yourself, I think, more to really appreciate the gift that you have within yourself that accomplish so much, that push so much.
Very much so.
So what are the next milestones for you in your mind? Where do you see yourself going? And I'm curious, have you thought, what took you here and what milestones you've done and what perseverance and resistance and persistence got you to where you're at today? Are there the same skills that you'll need to take you to the next level? Or are there certain things that you think you need to grow into to get to your next chapter in life?
Absolutely. And if I had to title the current chapter of my life, I'd probably call it Separate What You Can Control from What You Can't. And it's about recognizing that no matter how driven or how passionate we are, there are always elements outside of your control. And this chapter for me has been about finding peace and accepting that, while also doubling down on the things I can change. My mindset, my resilience, my approach to challenges. And in this chapter, watched myself come to realize that understanding this distinction is a powerful tool. It allows me to focus on my energy, on creating impact where I can, instead of getting caught up on what I can't change. But then there's that next chapter. And that's a really exciting one, because I would call that one, keep at it. You're worth it. And that's the reminder to myself and, of course, to anyone listening, that just because you've built a solid foundation doesn't mean the work is over. This world is evolving faster than ever. I've got a toolkit of strategies and principles that have worked well for me in other situations and to get me here, but that doesn't get me there. And it doesn't mean I'm hitting cruise control. In fact, it has to be the opposite. I need to be looking for ways to challenge the status quo, to keep up with what's happening around me. There's this temptation to think that once you've reached a certain level of success, you can stop pushing yourself. You can stop pushing your teams, your company. But being complacent is a very dangerous place to be, especially when everything around us is changing. Businesses, technology, especially with AI, and people. So in that next chapter, I need to choose to push myself to think beyond what's worked in the past and keep striving for more, because at the end of the day, I'm worth it. And I also hope this next chapter is about transformation, not just about me, but for impacting those I work with and those that are in my life. Because I know I have the ability to inspire others, to see their potential, to recognize that they're worth the effort it takes to push through the hard times and achieve great things. Because the truth is, we're all capable of more than we think, but we have to be willing to adapt, to learn, and to keep at it, because no one else can do it for us.
Amazing. What would you say younger girls who are still somewhere in, central United States and small towns, they're still struggling with self-doubt, whether or not they're worthy, whether or not they're capable, whether or not they should pursue the career, or they have some obstacles, they're less privileged to have an opportunity to take a loan or to do something with their life? What would you tell them how to go about it?
I would tell them to believe in themselves, to put one foot in front of another, right? To keep evolving. And you don't have to move to evolve. For me, moving was a way for me to break free and to do what I believed was next. But I think with a great mentality, you can get there on your own. And when people open up opportunities and open doors for you, walk through them, even when you don't feel ready in that moment. I think that's a lot of what's gotten me to this place, is not saying no, even when that self-doubt was like, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Yes, I can, but I have to lean into it. And I have to lean into that fear, because the more you lean into that, all of a sudden the things that scare you aren't that scary anymore when you look back on them. So believe in yourself.
So, Abby, thank you so much. It was my pleasure. I think I'm really hopeful that we can inspire some younger generations. There are people even any stage in life to really lean into those fears. A lot of people got laid off recently from large corporations. There's uncertainty in the air. There's self-doubt, and people say, well, I can't. Like, yes, I think you nailed it here. You can. And if you just believe in yourself, I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and people are willing to help. There are people out there willing to open doors and give a chance. Put a faith in you, but it's only working if you believe enough in yourself and allowing other people to open doors for you. So
Very
it's
much.
been my pleasure, Abby. I'm excited to catch up with you in several months, maybe 6 months to a year, see what your next chapter is, how it evolves, and how it inspires others. And I'd love to hear the next chapter of your story.
I am so excited to tell you it. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm excited for you to meet her.
Keep writing it then.
Thank you so much.